Here we are once again, looking to the last expansion to see what judgments players gave for the many cards released. Now, before we begin, I'm sure some of you are wondering, Penniless, why aren't you talking about the new announcement that came recently? And the simple answer is, these videos take time. I promised everyone this content over a month ago, and I have only 2 weeks where talking about Rastakhan's Rumble whatsoever will still be relevant. Though trust me, commentary on upcoming content is certainly in the works. Anyways, players' judgments about the cards of Rastakhan were relatively accurate. Building this list took quite a bit of effort on my part. But every once in a while, the masses has small judgment laps, and examining where they went wrong is one of the best ways to increase our collective understanding of this game. So, let's get right to it. This is the top 5 cards from Rastakhan's Rumble that players misrated. Mosh'ogg Enforcer. Big, hard to kill, and protects its hero with a passion. Unless of course the opponent has a Shadow Word Pain, Cabal Shadow Priest, or any form of hard removal. This was the logic players, including myself, gave when judging this card to be generally bad. All in all, this logic was pretty flawless, except for one teeny tiny variable that throws everything out of whack: Inner Fire. With that, behold the might that is Wall Priest, complete with Oakheart and Resurrect synergies. Normally, this would only be grounds for an honorable mention, because take away this card's synergies and it's once again not good enough. But this gets bumped to the number 5 spot for one reason. It's the only card I could find that players underestimated. Seriously! All the honorable mentions and 3 of the remaining cards on this list were overjudged and believed to be stronger than they were, with the Enforcer being the only card to truly surprise players. So this gets on the list for that reason. Now on to number 4, which is another unique case. Hakkar the Soulflayer. This ratings graph is a particularly unusual one, but shares parallels with another, the one for Mecha'thun in Boomsday. That should surprise no one. Both cards are big death rattle minions with game-ending effects. The only difference is that one requires your own deck to be destroyed, and the other requires your opponent's one to be. If that condition is accomplished and this minion destroyed, game over, you win. Well, mostly. A few more steps are necessary for Hakkar, but the point holds. In the end, this card should get the rating playable, for the simple reason that it can see play. But because this card has no tempo, which is usually the sign of a bad card, some players rate it lower. And because it's really cool and powerful, some players call it meta-defining. So this isn't exactly a case of players being wrong per se, the rating is simply skewed thanks to the type of card this is, with different sections of people drawing different conclusions with relatively sound logic. The very simple lesson here is, if you see a graph like this, that means the card itself is probably balanced, playable, and super weird. Now onto the large collection of cards that people thought would be good, but weren't. Spirit of the Lynx. The examiners of this card came to the conclusion that it could snowball hard and be a very useful tool for a token beast deck. You know, like the Lynxes of Rastakhan were supposed to be. Of course, the first problem with that is the 3 mana cost makes this card somewhat clunky and exposed to board clears, which immediately shut down this entire approach. That's not even considering anti-synergy with cards like Master's Call. However, some may look at the ratings of this card and go, that's not so bad, why is this number 3? But dig deeper and we have the issue. Turns out that the fancy mid-range hunter that utilizes this card is one of the weaker versions of mid-range hunter, and this minion is the weakest piece of that deck. Yikes! Rest assured that of the spirits cards, the Lynx is easily the hardest to use as intended. Bloodclaw. It doesn't take a master theorist to comprehend how this card's ratings got inflated. The fear of Odd Paladin drove players to panic slightly. After all, investing health into board presence is a classic strategy for many aggressive decks, and Odd Paladin is certainly an aggressive deck. Concluding that this card would be useful in this manner wasn't the worst logical leap possible. However, there are 2 flaws to this thinking. First, the actual power behind this card is incredibly off, with 5 health being worth way more than the swing in power that this card provides. But it's just health, some may argue, but the thing is that rival aggressive decks can easily take advantage of that drop in health. Now, I'm sure some players recognize this, but figured an odd deck could still fit it in. The problem here is that Odd Paladin's strength is not that it's aggressive, it's that it has token synergies. And token synergies, this card doesn't provide. All in all, this card seemed stronger than it was, and wasn't as strong a synergy as it seemed either. Together, that makes for an overrated card. Is everyone ready for the greatest anticlimax ever? Here it is, the most misrated card of all of Rastakhan, Serrated Tooth. Man, one-mana weapons can't catch a break these days. Getting higher ratings than Bloodclaw overall, perhaps players were simply hoping that rogues finally had a half-decent weapon. Or perhaps they compared it to Candleshot with a Death Rattle. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. This card has more parallels with Light's Justice than the Candleshot, because it turns out going immune on weapon attacks makes a very significant difference when facing aggressive decks. So the base stats are clearly weak, but what about the Death Rattle? While it's cool, it only provides a minor buff to minions that are played the same turn as it is activated. This means that the Death Rattle needs to be timed properly and used when the board is being contested. Assuming such a matchup is happening, that's clunky and unreliable. Meanwhile, in other matchups, it can be completely useless, doing nothing but preventing the use of the rogue's hero power. And finally, there's the idea of weapon buffing. Some may argue that Light's Justice would be strong in rogue. It wouldn't be, but let's assume so for now. The thing is, using weapon synergies on this also doesn't work, because it prevents you from wanting to destroy the weapon. So what appears to be a synergy is actually an anti-synergy. And as a final coup de grace, tech cards for weapons completely nullify this Death Rattle effect. In conclusion, this card is actually a lot more complicated than meets the eye, and a lot of variables that seem positive are actually detrimental. Hypothetically, a deck could maybe use this, but so far that does not appear to be the case whatsoever. Here are some other cards I considered for this list. Splitting Image. This card seemed overrated at first, but since the last balance patch, some odd mages are running it, and now I don't know what to believe. I'll just chalk that up to Baku's influence. Stolen Steel. While it was definitely overrated, I feel like some players rated it as such simply because of the cool factor, so I can't really condemn it. Stampeding Roar. If this were a top 6 list, this card would have definitely taken that slot. It's clunky and hard to use, but it may get a combination for itself someday. The Undertaker. There's definitely a story with this card, but I'm not entirely sure what that story is yet. Does it have yet to shine, or was it overrated? Let's keep an eye on it together. And finally, every single Spirit card. Let's just remember that only the Shark and the Rhino are actually working. The rest fell flat despite predictions of playability. But who knows, maybe one or two of them will make a comeback. Do you think I missed any? Any cards you've heard players claim to be excellent but weren't, or vice versa? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, thank you all, and smile on the just.